evening, everyone. Welcome to Business Today, your weekly business roundup brought to you exclusively on Channel I. And let's start our show for tonight with a quote by Jim Rohn, a famous author, entrepreneur, and a motivational speaker, where he said, "Successful people always do what unsuccessful people are not willing to do. They do not wish that the situations were better, instead they wish they were better." So with that thought in mind, let's start our show for tonight as we move on to Business Personalities segment. Yes, the business personality joining us today is representing a top entity in Sri Lanka. He's heading the central facilitation point for investors in Sri Lanka. So let's welcome him with the introduction clip.
Mr. Dumendra Ratnayaka was appointed as the chairman of Board of Investment in July 2017. Prior to that, he was holding the position of Chief of Executive Officer of Adequacy, Lanka, for 15 years and retired in 2014. Since his retirement, he has been involved in many activities, including helping and driving many entrepreneurial startups. Currently, he is a board director of Information Communication Technology Agency Sri Lanka and also serves in several other boards in the private sector. He has been instrumental, together with Dr. Hershada Silva, in launching and operating the 1990 ambulance service. He holds a degree in electronics and telecommunications engineering, and an individual with more than 24 years of experience in the telecommunication industry. He is a product of Royal College.
Yes, he is Mr. Dumendra Ratnayaka. He is the chairman of Board of Investment. A very good evening to you.
Good evening to you, Nisanga. Thank you for inviting me.
Right, so to start off our conversation, you took over as chairman BOI very recently, and BOI being such a key entity in Sri Lanka. How challenging was it to take such an important position?
It was quite challenging. Well, BOI, as you said, plays a huge role in the economic growth and the economy. I was in the board of BOI prior to taking over for about 6 months. And that actually led me to understand a lot of things. And one of the most important key things, that the BOI has an excellent staff. They're very knowledgeable, they're very committed and motivated. They are working hard against all odds to bring in investment. So that was the first reason that I took that responsibility, because it's not us who drive any institution, organization, it's the staff. Secondly, I have a decent experience working in a private entity for a multinational for almost 25 years. So I thought that the time has come for me to give something back. So this is why I took the challenge.
Great, and BOI has been in existence for the past 40 years. So can you talk about the FDIs, the foreign direct investments that have come into the country during the last 40 years? What is the contribution coming into the country and the economy from BOI?
Yes, BOI just in the month of September celebrated its 40 years of being in existence, or in its 40th anniversary. Within that 40 years, the BOI has brought in almost $14 billion worth of investment into the country, created almost 500,000 jobs. But more importantly, if you ask for the contribution, one very easy way to explain it would be to say that almost 65% of the national exports is through BOI companies. Okay. If you look at industrial exports, that is almost 85% of the industrial exports is through BOI companies. So that is huge. So that basically says how much contribution that the BOI is doing to the GDP and also to the economic growth of the country.
All right, and recently there was an amendment in the new Inland Revenue Act to withdraw certain tax concessions for BOI projects. So what do you think is the impact on FDI inflow with this move?
I think it's actually, a lot of people think that there's a negative impact, but I don't believe so. Yes, we do not have tax holidays anymore, but this is not since the new BOI, the new Indian Revenue Act. It was the case for 2 or 3 years right now. But more importantly, what this new act has brought in is policy consistency and predictability, which is one of the most important things that the investors look for. And in terms of facilities, or in terms of incentives that we can give now through this act, obviously for exports, the tax applicable is 14%. But then there are a large amount of incentives like accelerated depreciation, capital allowance up to 200%, tax credits, withholding tax, dividends without withholding tax, carry forward of losses. So there's so many facilities that are also built into that act that will bring the effective tax rate quite low. So actually for investors, capital heavy investors, this is a huge opportunity.
Okay, so how do we compete with the region in the absence of tax holidays? How do we compete with countries like Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam?
Yes, something that we need to face today is competition. I think when the BOI was started very early in the 1970s, during the period of the President Jayawardena, I suppose there was really no let's say competition at all. Now there is immediate neighbors who are competing with us, as well as Africa is coming into the picture. And in some countries labor is cheap, maybe they have tax holidays, but then you must look at the benefits that we have as a country. First and foremost, where we are placed. We are in the middle of towards Asia or to Europe. We do have many let's say treaties and agreements that give benefits like GSP Plus. We have agreements with the US, which investors who invest in our country can draw. Then we have skilled labor, though our labor may not be the cheapest. We have skilled labor. So likewise, we have a lot of benefits that we can use to attract investors. And I think competition is obviously good. Competition makes us become better, drive us to become better and efficient. And so that's the challenge we have in our hand, yes.
Right, you just mentioned about skilled labor. Yes, we do have skilled labor, but also there is a scarcity of skilled labor also, and there's a huge demand for skilled labor in the manufacturing sector. So what do you think are the reasons behind this, and what are your thoughts on
I
this
think
situation?
if you break it down to two reasons. One is two simple reasons. One is maybe there's a skill mismatch, considering what the manufacturing world is looking for and what our training schools are putting out. So there is an exercise that the government is looking at now, where I think they have already announced that everyone passing out from school will pass out with a certain amount of skill level, and BOI will coordinate in this area to say and to direct to say where the skills are required. Second thing is that there is sometimes negative perceptions that has been created, and I'm telling you because of teledramas and movies and certain types of misinformation, that working in BOI factories is not the best thing that one could do, which is completely wrong.
Which is not a white collar.
Yes, right. So that has also sometimes driven people away, because they are very well paying, these high skilled positions. So this is another challenge that I have in my hand, but I think it's manageable.
Okay, so how do we hope to solve this issue? Sri Lanka is no more a destination for cheap labor. So are we going to open up the market for skilled foreign labor to come into the local economy?
Well, we are no more a market for cheap unskilled labor. Right? That's where it is. And today's industries anyway, in the manufacturing area, are looking for skilled labor more than unskilled labor. And most probably we may not be a destination for any industry that's looking for cheap unskilled labor. But I think we do not need to import skilled labor. But we may obviously need to if necessary, import unskilled labor. Recently, State Minister Iran spoke about this. I saw it in the newspapers. So where we do not have adequate labor, yes, importing labor is also an option.
Right, and you are the key person heading BOI, and BOI is all about FDIs, foreign direct investment. So what are the key challenges you face in attracting investment? I think it will be a lengthy answer from you.
To make it actually a short answer, I can say, and this is another subject that many people have discussed and talked about, is ease of doing business, right? We are as a country today not at a good position. Our ease of doing business index is 120. And we should be somewhere in the range of 50. So we have a huge opportunity to improve, and that's the challenge I have, because any investor who is coming in, and we are now trying to attract large investors than small investors, they look at this. They prefer an easy path into, they do not like to spend a lot of time trying to get approvals, going from one agency to another agency. So we are doing a lot of things. First and foremost, BOI is spearheading an activity with the support of the World Bank, where we are trying to create a one-stop shop, a virtual one-stop shop, where investors who apply to invest here can basically get all the approvals through just one window, and along with the Indian Revenue Department, the Customs, the UDA, the CEA, etc., and that is progressing well. Now that will contribute largely to helping us having this ease of doing business come down. Then secondly, there are many committees that has been set up by the government today. There is a single window investment approval committee. There is investment approval facilitation committee, official economic management committee, cabinet committee for economic management. All these committees basically are being set up to look at various areas of bottlenecks and try to clear these bottlenecks. So there is a lot being done to reduce that challenge. I think the biggest challenge we have is this ease of doing business.
Right. So any key sectors you promote to attract investments?
Yeah, we've identified that we have identified 5 sectors: IT services, tourism, manufacturing, high value-added manufacturing, and high value-added to apparel, so both in that same area, and then logistics and food processing.
Right, and how can Sri Lanka explore new markets?
I mean, it's not a case of new markets. It's a case of attracting investors into this country. So one of the things that we have started is that, you see, first get the help of those who are here, who are happy, who have seen this country, who have understood this country, and in that sense we have this team at BOI. We call them the reinvestment team, who work with our existing investors, trying to encouraging them to invest in new areas, as well as getting leads from them, from people who are not here. Now, on the other hand, if you say there are new markets, we are working with Japan, we are working with China. There's a 100-strong Japanese delegation coming in January to Sri Lanka because they are interested in investing in this country. So there is a multi-pronged attack that is going on in terms of doing roadshows, in terms of approaching through existing investors, government-to-government discussions, etc. That is bringing in investors.
Right, and before taking over this position as Chairman BOI, you were the Chief Executive Officer of Etisalat for 15 years, and you were the first local to be appointed as CEO at Etisalat then. So why did you move out from that sector?
It's not that I moved out. In that sense, I had this wanting or this plan that when I turn 50, well, I'm an old man now, I wanted to do something different. So it was a plan that came up when I was 45. Some of my friends even didn't believe when I said that. So when I turned 50, I moved out, and I started doing many things. As you said in the introduction, I have been quite a lot involved in these entrepreneurs, helping them, guiding them, even in investing some of them. I have also got involved in another big project with Dr. Harsha De Silva, where I think you may have heard about the 1990 ambulance service that is there now in 2 provinces, providing pre-hospital care ambulance to the people of this country. So I've been doing many things. I have also been in a few boards. I'm in a few boards, including the ICTA. I was in the BOI board, so I wanted to do something different.
Right, so being in the telecommunication sector, how do you see the telecommunication sector growing over the past few decades?
I think it's growing well. I mean, it's been one of the biggest contributors to the economic growth in this country. There is a lot of competition in that industry, so it's growing and growing fast, and the operators are investing. We are one of the countries in the forefront in technology, but there are also challenges in that industry. The prices and the tariffs are quite low, which makes investment a challenge. There's a lot of taxation on the industry, which makes it a challenge. But I think the industry is going places, and it is also contributing a lot in terms of development.
Okay, as a veteran, what are your suggestions to improve the sector?
Well, I think there is really nothing much to do. I mean, just watch, because the operators are so keen in expanding and bringing in technology. I was recently at Dialog and Mobitel. They were introducing 5G, or they're actually even into testing of 5G. So even when it's just a few months that we have heard about 4G, we are talking about 5G. So that's why I said we are actually in the forefront. SLT is expanding quite fast, and now fiber to home. So many facilities of that nature. So I don't think I need to give them any suggestions.
Right. So throughout your career, you have been instrumental in helping and driving startups. Can you talk a little bit about those initiatives and the progress of those projects?
Yes, I think one of what I've been seeing since recently, for about the last, let's say, 3 to 4, 5 years, is that we have a very growing, let's say, picking up entrepreneur startup industry. And now, one of the key issues that most of the startups have is that they focus. They lack experience, they lack guidance, and also we have most of our startups focusing only towards the Sri Lankan market. We are a 20 million market. We are a small country. Right. You cannot survive focusing on this country. You need to look global. So I've been involved in helping them, advising them, teaching them, and even trying to get their focus to be global instead of local. And I'm involved in many initiatives when it comes to startups.
So what is your advice to them as a
think
veteran?
big and think global.
Right. So now let's talk about your favorite topic and project, that is the 1990 ambulance service, so which is operating 24 hours, and the service is absolutely free of charge. Can you talk about this initiative a little bit?
First of all, I must say that all credit should go to Dr. Harsha De Silva, Deputy Minister, because he has been the live wire behind this, and he's been instrumental in talking with the Prime Minister of India to get a grant to start this service in this country. I have been with him from day one, working with him to make sure that it gets launched and the operation is successful. We have also with us GVK MRI of India, which is a company that operates a service there in India, who has partnered with us here. They bring in the technological know-how, but all staff basically is Sri Lankan. We have almost about 500 Sri Lankan young people as pilots. Pilots means drivers of the ambulance, as well as the technicians who are there to take care of the patients. It's an amazing service because we carry almost 200 people every day now to the hospital.
Every day?
Yeah, in these two provinces, southern and western. All sort of reasons, accidents, pregnancies, heart attacks, animal bites, the amount of lives saved is I think is amazing. It's a really good service. It's basically first world service. Oh yes, it's a first world service in a third world country. And now we have also got, thanks to the Indian government, a grant to expand it. Prime Minister Modi promised it across the island. So we will be actually, once completed, have 300 ambulances running across the island with almost 2,500 staff working, all Sri Lankan, taking care of the Sri Lankan people.
Okay, so how do you hope to upgrade this service and expand it further in the next couple of years?
Yeah, so I mean, basically one of the things we are doing now is that we are there is an act that will come in Parliament very soon called the 1990 Suicide Foundation Act. So it will be run by a foundation, and this foundation will have the ability to generate funds. Government will give grants, as well as the foundation will be empowered to take more services to the people beyond the pre-hospital medical care. So basically right now there is another Sri Lankan agency of people living in Australia who help carry sick patients for dialysis from home to hospital. They're looking for somebody to operate this service. So we are skilled in operating ambulances, so we can do that. Likewise, we will look at many other services that we can provide to the people of Sri Lanka, maybe some of them at a fee, but the basic minimum emergency care will always be free.
Right, so we spoke about the challenges faced at BOI to attract FDIs. So if you look at yourself as an individual, what were the key challenges you have faced in your career?
Well, that's a difficult question. Obviously, I suppose my motto is that any challenge or any mistake that you do is an opportunity to learn. I tell this to everybody who I come across, and I think that's where my success has come from. So, I mean, the life is always full of challenges now, from day one onwards. So it's difficult to say, this is a challenge and that is a challenge. Every year, I mean, basically, when Etisalat was previously known as Tico and Celtel, that was owned by a different company, and then it moved to Etisalat. They requested me to continue. It was different management style. That was a challenge. Prior to that, we were fighting to expand during a period of war, and getting investment into the country from foreign investors. That was so. There's always challenges, every day is a challenge. Right.
So my final question to you is, before we wrap up, would you want to talk about the upcoming projects at BOI?
Well, I can't give you names and numbers, but there is a lot. There is a lot of small projects, then medium-scale projects, but also billion-dollar projects lined up. And so, I mean, some of them may be successful, some of them may be not. But I think in the next 2 to 3 years, BOI will do wonders.
Right. So thank you very much for being with us. It was lovely having you today. Thank you once again.
Nisanka. Thank you giving me.
Right, and he is Mr. Damendra Ratnayaka, Chairman of Board of Investment. So with that, we will move on to a short commercial break, and we will be back with you soon. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Business Today, and you know that we bring you updates from the Colombo stock market regularly, so it is now time for us to move on to the stock market segment. Yes, as usual, we have Sharaj Obesekara from Colombo Stock Exchange joining us to give a brief update on the stock market.
Good evening. I'd like to start this week's update by focusing on what was a shortened 4-day week of trading last week, and then move on to some yearly figures and end with some other news at the stock exchange. The market ended with the benchmark all share price index declining by 0.9% during the week to close at 6,573 points, while the S&P SL 20 index declined by 2% to close at 3,831 points by the end of last week. Taking a look at the trading volumes of the week, the market turnover was recorded at rupees 3.9 billion. The foreign investors finished on a net selling position during the week, recording rupees 1 billion in foreign outflows, which is quite a deviation from the trend we have witnessed throughout the year. To offer our viewers some perspective on the trends that we have seen so far in 2017, the stock market has recorded a turnaround compared to the past couple of years, where the all share price index has increased by 6.2% since the start of the year, and the S&P SL 20 index has also increased by 10.4% compared to the start of the year. Daily trading activity has also increased this year, with the daily average turnover recording a figure of rupees 937 million compared to 737 million in 2016, which also indicates improved activity among the investors. Foreign investments maintaining a net buying position is something that we've talked quite a bit about on the show so far this year, and that situation has continued to sustain. Net foreign inflow figure as of today stands at rupees 18.9 billion in the secondary market. So even though we did see a fairly slow performance in the market last week, the story of encouraging performance for the stock market in 2017 continues, and the market continues to present opportunities for investors with attractive valuations and returns. And judging by the level of interest we have seen by foreign investors so far this year, they have been the first to move on this opportunity. And on a related note, and in other news, the Invest Sri Lanka Forum in New York, which was held last week, was well received by the investor community in the US. The US is a key contributor to foreign turnover in the Sri Lankan stock market and has contributed to approximately 40% of foreign turnover since 2013. So US investors present at the event heard a strong case for investing in Sri Lankan stocks, led by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka Governor Dr. Indira Kumaraswamy. The governor speaking at the event stated that the macroeconomic stabilization of the economy is broadly on track, and that the structural reforms implemented over the past couple of years are showing signs of gaining traction. Investors present at the event did convey positive sentiments on the economic vision for the country and showed a keen interest in meeting and further engaging with the Sri Lankan listed companies through group and individual meetings. Up to 10 listed companies participated at the event. CSE and SEC officials also did speak on the sidelines of the event, also did speak to the Wall Street Journal, Reuters and Bloomberg, and further made a case for Sri Lanka and its way forward, and especially the capital market. And ending with how our local investors could learn more about the market and its current condition and opportunities, we will be hosting a range of educational programs in Ratnapura, Kandy, Negombo and Ambalantota through our branch network this week. We did have one at the stock exchange today in Colombo, and that too was well attended, and investors showed a keen interest. So participation for these programs are free of charge, and more details could be obtained through the CSE website www.csc.lk. All interested parties and investors are invited for these events. I would like to end the update on that note, and I hope to be back on the show next week. Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you, Sharaj, for the update. And with that, we are ready to move on to our final segment for today. And we have a guest representing a very important sector in our financial system, and that is none other than the banking sector. And we have with us Mr. Senurat Bandara president of the Association of Professional Bankers, and he's also Deputy General Manager of Bank of Ceylon. A very good evening to you.
Very good evening to you, Nizanga.
Right. To start things off, can we first talk about how the banking sector is doing right now?
Well, Nizanga, when you look at the Sri Lankan banking sector, there are 32 banks altogether, of which 25 banks are commercial banks, and the rest is development banks and the savings banks. When you look at the commercial banks, again, we have state-owned banks, privately owned banks, and the foreign banks. Year on year, banks are doing well and growing at a rate of about 15%. And the banking sector accounts for 10 trillion asset base, which is, as I said, growing at 15%. And when you look at the return
growing
on
at 15%.
15% annually. When you look at the return on assets, it gives about 1.4% on an annual basis. And if you look at the return on equity, it is somewhere around 18%. And the important thing is the cost to income ratio. That is, we call the efficiency ratio, which is going at 46%. When you look at the overhead cost compared to the 100 rupees income, it is 46 is fairly good. And if you look at the profit, last year in 2016, all banks reported a consolidated profit of around close to 200 billion, of which after tax it is about 116 billion. So about 82 billion was sent to the coffers as in the form of tax. In that sense, banks are really contributing to the economy directly as well, and also indirectly, of course, getting involved with so much of activities around the country. And we should not forget that banks are regulated by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. So all the banks are bound to follow norms, rules and regulations and should comply with certain ratios. And we follow the Sri Lankan accounting standards, and we have to follow international standards. I think those are the things really guided us to operate in a certain way that really help us to have a very stable and sound banking system in Sri Lanka. When you look at the branch network of all the banks, there are about close to 2,800 branches spread out all the country. On top of that, branches are having some extended service points with altogether maybe around 5,700. Plus we have ATMs, we have cash deposit machines, and we offer internet banking, mobile banking. So unlike in other countries like India, but Sri Lanka has a very penetrated banking system. Even in a rural area within a 10-15 kilometers, you can find a branch of a bank. So in that sense, I would say that it's well spread out and giving a good service to the community all throughout the country. And also in the recent developments, when we look at the sustainability, most of the banks are going into the green banking side, doing most of the digitalization, more towards paperless society. All in all, I would say good.
All right, that's nice to hear.
Yes.
And as per the last year's budget proposal, there was a requirement to bring in the minimum capital requirement to 20 billion rupees. So what do you think is the reason behind this requirement, and why do you think such requirements are necessary?
Well, yeah, at the last year's budget, the government failed that because if you look at the asset base, it is quite polarized within 6 banks. Like 6 banks account for about 65% asset base. So government wanted to have a very strong banks, large size banks, in order to penetrate and being able to raise funds internationally and various diverse avenues. And also when you look at the banking sector, we are very much exposed to the risk. If you are big and if you are big enough, then you can withstand the risks that are coming from the external sources. So these are the real reason, I would say, why government came out with this proposal. So actually they impose on a commercial bank to have a minimum of 20 billion capital, as you said, and for the savings and other banks 7.5 billion capital. So these are the reasons why the government came up. On top of that, there is a capital adequacy requirement also coming from the Basel committee, that is for international regulation requirements. So according to Basel requirement also the capital requirement is going up. So naturally from one hand internationally it's a requirement for us to have a higher capital. From the Sri Lankan point of view, government felt that it is better to have a strong and big size banks. Voluntary consolidation is the advocate, actually government came out with that budget.
Right, so talking about the industry, state banks, unlike other state-owned enterprises, are doing quite well in the market compared to the private sector banks. State banks are doing quite well. What do you think is the reason behind it? Being a representative of a large state bank in Sri Lanka, I'm sure you can answer this question.
Yeah, Nisanga, I would say that all banks are regulated. So whether we are state or private, so we are bound to follow certain rules and regulations.
Governed by one party.
Governed by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. I think that's a kind of immunity given to state banks. So we have to have certain capital adequacy requirements, liquidity requirements, then non-performing assets ratio we should keep it down. So we have to maintain certain credit deposit ratios. These are the main norms that we should maintain. Those are fundamental to the banking industry. I think that really contribute us to do better.
Right.
That is one aspect. Another is, I would say that banking is a professional. So we always interact with private banks, foreign banks, especially through the Association of Professional Bankers. So we ourselves consider as professionals. So we always try to maintain that professionalism and approach our business in an ethical and in a good conduct manner. Right. So I think these are the things that really contribute to do better, though we are a public organization.
Right, so you are the president of the Association of Professional Bankers. Can you talk about its role and how is this association supporting the banking sector?
Actually, we are supporting the banks in several ways. Before coming to that, I would like to mention why it was formed, Nisang. I think then we can better understand what we are, what Association of Professional Bankers is. This association was formed in July 1988. And it was formed by committed senior bankers with the mission having to sustain high standard of professionalism and integrity, and also to advance the public interest in the banking and maintain the high ethical standards and the governance. Those are the key objectives of setting this association. So when we come back to the roles, the questions that you raise really, we are doing a lot. One thing is that we are keeping the community together, whether we are a state-owned bank or a private bank or a foreign bank employee. We move together, we keep that cohesiveness, we maintain those ethical standards, and we work as a one family unit. And the other thing is that we help a lot to develop the younger generation of bankers in various ways.
Right, so as a veteran banker, can you be happy with the level of knowledge of bankers in Sri Lanka, and what are the initiatives taken by the association to upgrade the knowledge?
I am very happy about the knowledge level of the employees. When we select employees, when we do the recruitment, we always looked at the basic educational qualifications, but that is not the only requirement for us to recruit people into banks. Okay. We look at their aptitude levels, intelligence levels, whether they can absorb this banking and go forward, improve their career. So that itself shows that they can come into the banks and learn the internal processes and procedures and all these governance structures. And we always encourage young bankers to follow the banking exams. That's the professional qualifications conducted at the Institute of Bankers of Sri Lanka. In fact, it's a requirement for us to get the membership as well. So always we encourage them to be professional. So it's a learning process, continuous process. By doing that, they of course acquire the knowledge.
Right. So can you also talk about the key challenges faced by the industry? It's not applicable for one particular bank, but for the entire industry. And how do banks team up together to face those challenges?
Yes, these days capital is one challenge. As I said, Basel III, according to Basel III norms, now we have to increase the capital adequacy ratio. From July this year onwards, we have to maintain 11.75% capital. That means we have to maintain core capital as a ratio of the risk-weighted assets. So we simply can't lend We have to maintain the capital adequacy ratio. Within that only we can grow our loan book. By 2018 January we have to meet 12.875. By 2019 we'll have to meet 14%. That's quite a big number. So that is one challenge, meeting the capital adequacy requirements. That's common to all banks. Another one is complying with the IFRS 9 recent regulations. That's the accounting standard that we will have to comply with.
Okay.
That is something new. It's a new phenomena. So where we have to look at the future loss models of our borrowers. Based on that, we will have to provide sometimes the provisions that will have an impact on our profitability as well as the capital. And biggest common challenge is the cyber threat. We all are into IT, technology, digitalization. We talk all these things, but it's a common threat. You know, malware, phishing attacks, and so many things happening around. So we have to safeguard our internal assets also from this cyber threat. Those are common challenges, I would say.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Senrad Bandara, for joining us today. It was lovely having you with us.
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
And we wish you all the very best.
Too. Thanks. Bye.
Right. With that, we got to wrap up for today. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for being a part of business today. We will see you next week. Take care and good night.